"Get out. You don't belong here." The words sliced through the festive hum of the high school auditorium like a thunderclap, shattering the joy of the moment. Maria Thompson, a soft-spoken single mother of 42, stood rooted to the spot, her calloused hands clutching a worn leather purse that had seen better days. Her heart pounded as the two security guards loomed over her, their faces etched with disdain. The taller one, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights, pointed a thick finger toward the exit. "This is a respectable event," he barked, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're out of place." The crowd around her, hundreds of parents dressed in polished suits and elegant dresses, fell silent, their eyes darting between Maria and the guards. Whispers rippled through the rows of folding chairs, and Maria felt the weight of their stares like a physical blow. Maria's faded sundress, a pale blue number she'd bought at a thrift store years ago, clung to her slight frame. Her sandals, scuffed and fraying at the edges, were the only pair she owned that didn't pinch her feet after long shifts at the diner. She had spent weeks planning for this day, Jake's high school graduation, a milestone that symbolized everything she'd fought for. Jake, her only child, was graduating with honors, the valedictorian of his class, and the first in their family. To earn a diploma, Maria had poured every ounce of her strength into raising him alone, working double shifts, skipping meals to save money, stitching his clothes when they tore. She'd walked 3 miles to work when her car broke down, her feet blistered but her resolve unbroken. This was supposed to be her moment too, a chance to sit proudly among the other parents and cheer as Jake crossed the stage. But now, humiliation burned in her chest. The guard's words echoed in her mind. "You don't belong here." The shorter guard, his arms crossed, sneered at her outfit. "This isn't a soup kitchen," he said, loud enough for the nearby families to hear. A few parents snickered, their polished shoes and designer bags, a stark contrast to Maria's modest appearance. She wanted to disappear, to sink through the polished wooden floor and escape the judgmental eyes. Her cheeks flushed and her throat tightened, but she refused to let the tears spill. Not here, not now. She wouldn't let these men ruin Jake's day. He didn't even know she was here yet, waiting in the back row to surprise him. She'd told him she might have to work, but she'd swapped shifts, determined to see him shine. Maria took a shaky breath, her fingers trembling as she adjusted her purse strap. "I'm his mother," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "I just want to see my son graduate." The taller guard rolled his eyes. "Rules are rules. You're not dressed appropriately. Move along." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some sympathetic, others cruelly amused. A woman in a pearl necklace whispered to her husband, "Why would she show up like that?" Maria's heart sank further. She'd spent hours that morning trying to look presentable, brushing her dark hair into a neat bun, even borrowing a neighbor's iron to smooth out the wrinkles in her dress. But it wasn't enough, not for these guards, not for this crowd. She turned toward the exit, her shoulders hunched, each step feeling heavier than the last. The auditorium's double doors loomed ahead, promising escape from the shame but also the end of her dream to see Jake's triumph. She thought of the nights she'd stayed up helping him with homework, the mornings she'd packed his lunch with whatever scraps were left in the fridge, the years of love and sacrifice that had led to this moment. Was it all for nothing? Yes. She reached for the door handle, her hand trembling. A low murmur spread through the crowd behind her. It wasn't the sound of pity or mockery this time. It was something else, something electric. Maria paused, her breath catching. Footsteps, heavy and purposeful, echoed from the hallway outside. The doors burst open with a force that made the hinges groan, and the room fell into stunned silence. Maria's humiliation was the last thing Jake expected his mother to face on his graduation day. But Jake, a lanky 18-year-old with his mother's kind eyes and a quiet strength, had shared her story with someone who understood sacrifice in a way few could. Coach Mike Daniels, his high school football coach and a retired Navy SEAL. At 52, Coach Daniels was a towering figure with a weathered face, a man whose presence commanded respect, but whose warmth made him a mentor to countless kids like Jake. He'd noticed Jake's grit on the field, how the boy never complained, never quit, even when exhaustion showed in his eyes. Over 2 years, During late-night study sessions at the school library and post-game talks under the stadium lights, Jake opened up about his mother. "She's my hero," Jake had said one evening, his voice low as he sat on the bleachers, his cleats muddy from practice. "She works double shifts at the diner, walks to work when the car's busted, and never lets me go without. She sold her locket, her only memory of her mom, to buy me these." He pointed to his cleats, scuffed but lovingly maintained. Coach. Daniels listened, his jaw tight, his heart heavy with admiration for a woman he'd never met. Maria Thompson wasn't just a mother, she was a warrior, fighting battles most couldn't imagine. When Jake mentioned the graduation, worrying his mom might miss it because of work, Coach's mind started turning. Maria deserved to be there, front and center, and he'd make sure of it. Coach Daniels wasn't alone in his resolve. By a stroke of fate, 5 of his old SEAL buddies were in town for a rare reunion, their first in nearly a decade. These men: Lieutenant Tom Harris, Chief Luis Ramirez, Petty Officer Jack Sullivan, Senior Chief Nate Carter, and Master Chief Wilbur Lawson had served together in some of the most grueling missions, from desert raids to covert ops in hostile waters. They were brothers forged in fire, bound by a code of loyalty and honor. The night before the graduation, Coach invited them to his modest home on the edge of town, where they sat around a weathered oak table, beers in hand, swapping stories of old missions and new aches. As the night wore on, Coach's tone shifted. "I've got a kid on my team," he said, leaning forward, his voice thick. "Jake Thompson. Best kid I've ever coached. His mom, Maria. She's given everything for him, works herself to the bone, never complains. Jake says she might not make his graduation tomorrow. I want to change that." The SEALs leaned in, their eyes sharp. Coach told them about Maria, how she'd raised Jake alone after his father walked out when he was 3. How she'd worked 16-hour days to keep a roof over their heads. How she'd taught herself algebra to help Jake with homework. Staying up past midnight with a library book and a flickering lamp. "She's the kind of person we fought for," Coach said. "And tomorrow, some fancy dress code might keep her from seeing her boy shine. I say we make sure that doesn't happen." Lieutenant Harris, a grizzled man with a scar across his left cheek, set his beer down hard. "No one disrespects a woman like that. Not on our watch." Chief Ramirez, whose quick wit hid a fierce loyalty, nodded. "What's the plan, Mike?" The others, Sullivan, Carter, and Lawson, grinned. Already in, they'd faced dictators and storms. This was personal. The plan was simple but bold. The SEALs would attend the graduation in full dress uniforms, white jackets, polished medals, the works. Their presence alone would command respect, ensuring Maria wasn't turned away. Coach had met Maria once briefly at a parent-teacher conference, and he knew she'd be there, dress code or not. Jake had let slip that she'd swapped shifts, determined to surprise him. "She's stubborn like that," Jake had said with a proud smile. Coach contacted Jake's guidance counselor to confirm Maria's attendance and got the green light to bring his friends to the ceremony. The SEALs spent the morning before the graduation polishing their uniforms, each medal a testament to their service: Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, Navy Crosses. They didn't just want to show up, they wanted to make a statement. As Maria reached for the auditorium doors, her head bowed in defeat. The SEALs were already on their way. They'd parked their rental van, a nondescript black beast, outside the school, their uniforms drawing curious glances from passersby. Coach led the way, his stride purposeful, his mind focused. He'd seen Maria's description from Jake: petite, dark hair in a bun, probably in a simple dress. As they approached the auditorium, they heard raised voices through the open doors. Coach's gut tightened. "That's her," he said, picking up the pace. The others followed, their boots echoing in unison. When they burst through the doors, the crowd's murmur stopped, replaced by gasps. 6 Navy SEALs in full dress, medals gleaming, stood like a wall of honor. Coach's eyes locked on the guards, who were still berating Maria. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. Maria turned, her face a mix of confusion and hope. The SEALs had arrived, and everything was about to change. The auditorium fell into a stunned hush as Coach Mike Daniels stepped forward, his 5 Navy SEAL comrades forming a formidable line behind him. Their white dress uniforms adorned with rows of medals, purple hearts, bronze stars, Navy crosses, glinted. Under the auditorium's lights, each pin and ribbon a testament to battles fought and sacrifices made. The air crackled with their presence, an unspoken authority that made the crowd lean forward in their seats. Coach's steel-gray eyes locked onto the taller guard who moments ago had been berating Maria with smug confidence. Now the guard's hand dropped from its pointing gesture, his shoulders slumping under the weight of Coach's gaze. "Is there a problem here?" Coach repeated, his voice low and deliberate. Each word carrying the quiet menace of a man who'd faced far worse than a pair of overzealous security guards. The taller guard, its badge, reading Carlson, stammered, his earlier bravado evaporating. She doesn't meet the dress code," he managed, gesturing weakly at Maria's faded sundress. Once booming, now sounded small, almost childish in the face of the SEAL's commanding presence. The shorter guard named Jenkins according to his badge, shifted uncomfortably, his arms uncrossing as he glanced nervously at his partner. The crowd watched, breathless, sensing a shift in power. Maria, still clutching her purse, stood frozen, her dark eyes darting between the guards and the 6 men, who had appeared like guardians from nowhere. Her heart pounded, a mix of confusion and a faint flicker of hope. Who were these men, and why were they here? Coach Daniels took another step forward, his polished shoes clicking on the wooden floor. "Dress code?" he said, his voice laced with disbelief. This woman raised a valedictorian on her own. She's worked harder than anyone in this room. Sacrificed more than you can imagine. You think a dress makes her less respectable? His words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. A few parents in the crowd nodded, their expressions softening as plays like these were clearly going viral on YouTube. Some clapped softly, a ripple of support spreading through the auditorium. Maria's cheeks flushed, but this time it wasn't. From shame it was from the sudden, overwhelming realization that she wasn't alone. Lieutenant Tom Harris, a grizzled SEAL with a scar across his cheek, stepped up beside Coach, his piercing gaze fixed on the guards. "You're telling me you'd kick out a mother who gave everything for her son?" he said, his gravelly voice cutting through the silence. "You should be saluting her, not humiliating her." The crowd murmured in agreement, the tide of opinion turning. Chief Luis Ramirez, standing to Harris's left, crossed his arms, his medals gleaming. "I've seen courage in war zones," he said, his tone calm but firm. "This woman's got more of it than both of you combined." The guards' faces paled, their authority crumbling like dry sand. The principal, Mr. Hargrove, a nervous man in a slightly ill-fitting suit, hurried down the aisle, his face slick with sweat. He'd been watching from the sidelines, hesitant to intervene until the SEAL's arrival forced his hand. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered, shooting a glare at the guards. "Mrs. Thompson is absolutely welcome here. There's been a mistake." He turned to Maria, his voice overly apologetic. "Please, ma'am, we're so sorry. Let me find you a seat." But Coach Daniels held up a hand, silencing him. "No need," he said, his tone final. He turned to Maria, his rugged face softening into a warm smile. "Ma'am, may we escort you to your seat?" Maria's breath caught, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She looked at the SEALs, their uniforms a stark contrast to her simple dress, yet their respect for her was palpable. She nodded, unable to speak, her throat tight with emotion. The crowd erupted into applause, the sound swelling as Coach offered his arm. The other SEALs formed a protective semicircle around her, their presence a shield against the earlier humiliation. Petty Officer Jack Sullivan, the youngest of the group, gave her a reassuring nod. "You're the guest of honor today," he said softly. Senior Chief Nate Carter and Master Chief Wilbert Lawson stood tall behind her, their faces stoic, but their eyes warm with admiration. As they led Maria to the front row, the applause grew louder, a wave of support washing over her. Parents stood, clapping, some wiping tears from their eyes. The woman in pearls, who had whispered cruelly before, now looked ashamed, joining the ovation. Maria, overwhelmed, kept her head high, her hand resting lightly on Coach's arm. The guards, now forgotten, slunk to the back of the auditorium. Their heads bowed. The SEALs took their places behind Maria's seat, standing like sentinels, their presence a silent promise that no one would disrespect her again. The ceremony resumed, but the energy in the room had transformed. Maria was no longer invisible. She was the heart of the moment. The auditorium lights dimmed slightly as the graduation ceremony resumed, the air still buzzing with the energy of the SEALs' dramatic intervention. Maria Thompson sat in the front row, her heart pounding, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The 6 Navy SEALs stood behind her like a wall of honor. Their white dress uniforms crisp, their medals catching the light with every subtle movement. Coach Mike Daniels, Lieutenant Tom Harris, Chief Luis Ramirez, Petty Officer Jack Sullivan, Senior Chief Nate Carter, and Master Chief Wilbert Lawson formed an unyielding presence. Their faces stoic, but their eyes warm with respect for the woman they defended. Maria, still reeling from the confrontation, felt an unfamiliar warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. The crowd's applause still echoed in her ears, sound that had transformed her shame into something new. Pride, perhaps, or hope. The principal, Mr. Hargrove, took the stage, adjusting his tie nervously as he addressed the crowd. "We apologize for the earlier disruption," he said, his voice unsteady. "Let's celebrate our graduates." The audience settled, but their eyes kept drifting to Maria and the SEALs, the moment etched into their minds. Maria's gaze fixed on the stage, where students in navy blue caps and gowns waited for their names to be called. She hadn't seen Jake yet. He was backstage, preparing for his valedictorian speech, unaware of the drama that had unfolded. Maria had kept her attendance a secret, swapping shifts at the diner to surprise him. She imagined his face, that wide grin he'd flash when he saw her, and her heart ached with anticipation as the names rolled on. Maria's thoughts drifted to the years that had led to this moment. She remembered the nights she'd stayed up, her fingers raw from sewing Jake's torn jeans. The mornings she'd packed his lunch with whatever was left in their bare fridge, half a sandwich, an apple past its prime. She'd walked 3 miles to work when their old car gave out, her feet blistered but her resolve unbroken. Who'd never complained? Who'd made her laugh even on the hardest days? When he'd been named valedictorian, Maria had cried alone in their tiny apartment. Her pride so fierce it felt like it might burst. Now sitting here, surrounded by heroes who'd stood up for her. She felt that pride swell again, mingling with gratitude. The announcer's voice broke her reverie. "Jacob Michael Thompson, valedictorian." The crowd erupted in applause as Jake stepped onto the stage, his cap slightly askew, his grin as bright as Maria had imagined. He scanned the auditorium, his eyes searching for a familiar face. They landed on his mother in the front row, flanked by the SEALs. His jaw dropped. For a moment, he froze, his expression a mix of shock and joy. Maria's breath caught, and she smiled, her eyes glistening. Jake's grin widened, and he gave a small, proud nod as if to say, "You made it, Mom." The SEALs, standing behind her, exchanged glances, their stoic faces softening with subtle smiles. Coach Daniels leaned down slightly, whispering, "That's your boy, ma'am. You did good." Jake took the podium, adjusting the microphone with a nervous laugh. The crowd quieted, eager to hear the valedictorian's speech. "I wasn't sure what to say today," he began, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I had all these ideas about the future, about chasing dreams, but standing here, seeing my mom in the front row, I know exactly what I need to say." He paused, his eyes locking with Maria's. "My mom, Maria Thompson, is my hero. Worked double shifts at a diner, walked miles when our car broke down, gave up everything so I could have a chance. She taught me that hard work and love can overcome anything. Every late night studying, every moment I wanted to give up, she was there, believing in me. This diploma isn't just mine, it's hers." The auditorium erupted again, a standing ovation that shook the rafters. Maria's tears finally spilled, streaming down her cheeks as she clapped, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. The SEALs behind her joined the applause, their gloved hands clapping firmly, their faces beaming with respect. Lieutenant Harris, usually stone-faced, wiped a corner of his eye. Chief Ramirez gave a low whistle, murmuring, "Kid's got heart." The crowd's cheers grew louder, parents and students alike, moved by Jake's words and the sight of Maria. A woman who'd faced humiliation and emerged as the heart of the ceremony. The woman in pearls who'd whispered cruelly earlier stood clapping, her face flushed with shame and admiration. Jake continued, his voice growing stronger. "We all have someone who's fought for us, who's carried us through. I honor my mom's system, Mom, but I honor everyone who's made sacrifices for others." He looked at Maria again, his eyes shining. "Mom, this is for you." The crowd roared, and Maria, overwhelmed, felt the SEALs' steady presence behind her, a reminder of their defense. As Jake stepped off the stage, diploma in hand, he ran to Maria, hugging her tightly. The auditorium stood again, their applause a thunderous wave of support. The story of Maria Thompson and the 6 Navy SEALs didn't end when the graduation ceremony concluded. It was only the beginning of a wave that would sweep far beyond the small town's auditorium, touching hearts across the country and beyond. By the next morning, a shaky smartphone video of the SEALs' dramatic entrance had surfaced on YouTube, uploaded by a parent in the crowd who'd captured the entire scene. The clip showed Maria's hunched shoulders as the guards berated her, the doors bursting open, and the 6 SEALs striding in, their medals gleaming under the auditorium lights. The moment Coach Daniels asked, "Is there a problem here?" it sent chills through viewers. And the crowd's thunderous applause as Maria was escorted to the front row brought tears to thousands. Titled "Navy SEALs Defend Mom at Son's Graduation." The video racked up 10,000 views by noon, then 100,000 by evening. By the end of the week, it had millions comments flooded the video, a tidal wave of emotion. "This gave me chills," wrote one user. "Maria is a queen, and those SEALs are legends." Another commented, "I cried watching this proof. There's still good in the world." People shared their own stories of overcoming judgment, of unsung heroes stepping up, of parents sacrificing for their kids. The video's virality caught the attention of local news, then national outlets. A reporter from the town's newspaper interviewed Maria, who was shy at first, unused to the spotlight. "I just wanted to see Jake graduate," she said softly. Sitting in her modest apartment, a cup of tea trembling in her hands. "I never expected any of this." When asked about the SEALs, her eyes welled up. "They didn't even know me, but they stood up for me. I'll never forget that." The reporter also tracked down Coach Daniels, who was back at the high school, coaching summer practice. "We just did what was right," he said, brushing off the hero label. "Maria's the real warrior here. Raising a kid like Jake on her own, that's tougher than any mission I've been on." The other SEALs, Lieutenant Harris, Chief Ramirez, Petty Officer Sullivan, Senior Chief Carter, and Master Chief Lawson echoed his humility in a group interview on a national morning show. "We saw an injustice," Harris said, his scar catching the studio lights. "Maria deserved respect, not humiliation. We'd do it again in a heartbeat." Their words resonated, and the story became a beacon of hope, a reminder that kindness and courage could shift the course of a moment. The public's response was overwhelming. A crowdfunding campaign started by a viewer raised thousands for Maria within days. Donations for new clothes, a reliable car, and even a small fund for Jake's college expenses. Strangers sent letters and gifts to the diner where Maria worked, including a new pair of shoes to replace her worn sandals. A local boutique owner, moved by the story, invited Maria for a free wardrobe makeover, insisting, "You deserve to feel as beautiful as you are." Maria, hesitant at first, accepted, and the boutique shared photos of her in a vibrant dress, her smile radiant.
Ow.
The images went viral too, with comments like "She's glowing."
Ow.
And this is what community looks like. Job offers poured in, better paying positions at offices and retail stores, opportunities that promised Maria stability. She took her time, overwhelmed but grateful, eventually accepting a role as a receptionist at a community center, where her warmth and resilience made her a favorite among coworkers. For Jake, the attention brought a scholarship from a local university, seizing the financial burden of his engineering degree. He dedicated his studies to his mother, vowing to make her sacrifices worthwhile. "She gave me everything," he told a reporter, Now it's my turn to give back. The SEALs, too, felt the impact. Their act inspired others to stand up against small injustices, whether it was defending a coworker or helping a stranger. Coach Daniels received messages from former students, inspired to pay it forward. Lieutenant Harris, usually reserved, admitted the experience reminded him why he'd served, to protect the vulnerable. The story even reached military communities, with veterans sharing it as a reminder of their values. A naval base in Virginia invited the SEALs to speak, where they emphasized unity and respect. Crediting Maria as the true hero, the school faced scrutiny for the guards' actions. The principal issued a public apology, and the guards, Carlson and Jenkins, were reassigned after sensitivity training. The incident sparked a policy review, ensuring no parent would be turned away for their appearance again. Maria, though, held no grudge. They made a mistake, she said. What matters is how people came together. Her grace only deepened the public's admiration. Months later, the story still trended, inspiring YouTube creators to make reaction videos and tributes. One creator, with 1 million subscribers, called it the ultimate feel-good moment of the year. Maria and Jake watched these videos together, laughing and crying at their unexpected fame. For Maria, the greatest reward was seeing Jake thrive, his confidence bolstered by the world's support. The SEALs stayed in touch, sending Jake a care package for college with a note, "Keep making your mom proud." Maria, once invisible, became a symbol of resilience, proving that even in the darkest moments, heroes can emerge to turn shame into triumph.